The PlayStation 5 has been out since November of 2020. And since then, I feel like for the most part, it hasn't quite reached the level of sales that the PS4 has reached during the teens decade. And and honestly, like the PlayStation 5 has still done pretty well in terms of sales. 'Cause I think the console has done like 75 million units worldwide. And that was a number that was reported back in February this past month. And and I don't know. I mean, I'm looking at the best-selling games for the PlayStation 5, and there isn't too many. There's like about maybe 8 or something like that. And you look at the PlayStation 4, it's like there's a ton of best-selling games on the PlayStation 4. And of course, the PlayStation 4 had been out longer, and and they've had like, better, high-profile games that actually had a ton of commercial success. But but I don't know. There was just something about, I guess, the PlayStation 4 that I guess people found more appealing than the PlayStation 5. Don't get me wrong, like the graphics for the PlayStation 5, the Blu-ray tracing, the haptic feedbacks, all those features and stuff are all great. But when when the game console first came out back in late 2020, I think it was priced somewhere around the ballpark of 49.99, and I think that was just like for the standard edition. And yeah, I mean, I remember there was a point in time where it was hard to find PlayStation 5s at stores, like at retailers like Walmart or Best Buy or, what have you, because because a lot of people wanted it. People were like pre-ordering it and all that stuff. And and nowadays, I don't hear about that so much anymore, and I'm not exactly sure why. Is it because there's not a lot of high-profile titles on the PS5 that really like impress people, or is it because this generation in general is just like struggling with gaming? Are people losing interest in like video games altogether? Is it because of like the cost of living and I guess just the cost of items in general have skyrocketed? Or is it because I don't know, there's not as much enthusiasm or soul in video games nowadays compared to what we got, 10 plus years ago. And and I don't know, I feel like a lot of people have different opinions on that. But you look at the PlayStation 5, I think it's been out for a little more than 4 years now. And and there's actually been rumors floating around about PlayStation 6 and the fact that it might be coming around sooner than expected. And the reason I say that is because I was on Digital Trends a little bit earlier today, and I read something about, I guess, the senior vice president of Sony saying something along the lines of like, the company's looking forward to like the next console and all that stuff. There's no confirmation of the PlayStation 6 being in development or anything like that, but in my opinion, I think it's kind of early. And the reason I say that is because you look at the life cycle that the PlayStation 4 had. The PlayStation 4, I believe, came out in late 2013, and we didn't get the PlayStation 5 until late 2020. So that's like about like 7 years at least. So I would say that the PlayStation 5 is about, I would say it's like a little more than halfway. Yeah, a little more than like halfway during its life cycle for the most part. And and I feel like we definitely have like a few more years before the PlayStation 6 is going to be unveiled, because I'm pretty sure that if the PlayStation 6 were to come out sometime in 2027, Sony would have mentioned something, or they would have given us some kind of announcement or hint, or some type of trailer or whatever, alluding to the fact that we might get a PlayStation 6 next year. But it's something I highly doubt. And I've actually looked online. I've seen videos about the PlayStation 6 possibly coming out in 2027, and and I don't know. I mean, it's because I feel like the PlayStation 5 hasn't had enough time to surpass the PS4 in terms of overall sales, and I think the PS4, I think in terms of overall sales, it reached like over 117 million units. So I wouldn't be shocked if Sony decided to hold off on the PS6 until I guess the PS5 came within striking distance of surpassing the PS4 in terms of overall sales. But yeah, I mean, I'm actually surprised by like the PlayStation 5 and the first party games and the fact that it hasn't sold much as what we got on the PlayStation 4 and the top selling games on the PS4. Because right now, the top selling games on the PlayStation 5, number one, I believe, is like Marvel Spider Man 2, which did like 11 mil. Number two is Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart, which did over. I think it did like roughly under like 4 mil, did like over like 3.9. And you have Elden Ring, which did like roughly around 3.6 mil in terms of sales. And this is something that kind of caught me as a surprise. Final Fantasy 16 is actually one of the best selling games on the PlayStation 5. I think it came in number four, doing over 3 mil in terms of sales. And and that's crazy because like Marvel Spider-Man 2 is basically in a league of its own in terms of popularity and in terms of sales. But at the same time, it hasn't sold as much as the original Marvel Spider-Man game from 2018, which appeared on the PS4, which did 20 million in terms of sales. So obviously, when it comes to PlayStation consoles, Spider-Man is clearly the main attraction. And the thing that kind of like disturbs me a little bit is that in terms of like best-selling PlayStation 5 video games, I don't see God of War Ragnarok anywhere on the list. And don't get me wrong, a lot of people say it's a good game. In fact, I even have the game itself. I played it. It's tons of fun. But at the same time, I feel like Sony has been keeping quiet about the sales figures regarding God of War Ragnarok, and and obviously, I don't think that game is going to sell anywhere as much as the God of War game from 2018. And and I'm not exactly sure whether or not that's a good or a bad sign for the franchise overall, because a lot of people are looking forward to the next God of War game. Some people feel like that should be saved for the PlayStation 6. I feel like that's way too long. You don't want people to lose interest in the series and then all of a sudden come out of nowhere and try to put out a new game when no one really cares about it anymore. And you look at Astrobot, and Astrobot is one of the best selling games on the PlayStation 5. It did 1.5 million in terms of sales. And it's quite possible that those numbers can go up as time goes by because the game had just came out a couple of months ago, back in September. But yeah, it's like there's not a lot of like a lot of high profile first party, PlayStation games that have been doing too big in sales aside from like Marvel Spider-Man 2. And honestly, I feel like I don't know. I feel like Sony may have to, I guess, revive some older IPs, or they may have to like do something different to appeal to casuals because most of the best-selling games on the PlayStation 5 are either action adventure or action role-playing games, and I know those two genres are really popular for the most part. But it seems like just about every video game company or developer you can think of is basically doing the same thing. They're putting out action RPGs or action adventure games, and honestly, it's easy for people to get lost in terms of what they prefer. And honestly, that competition kind of makes it difficult for, I guess, like certain companies to sell as much as they'd want to. And and I don't know. I still feel like we're gonna have to wait a while for the PlayStation 6. I don't expect it to appear as early as 2027, but I would be shocked if that were the case. I still feel like the PlayStation 5 needs more time to, I guess, catch up to the PlayStation 4 in terms of overall sales, if it does. And another indication, like to me, anyways, that the PlayStation 6 might be a little bit further off than like we think is the fact that we're still getting games or like brand new games and video game releases that are appearing not only for the PlayStation 5 but for the PlayStation 4 as well, even though the PlayStation 4 is more than a decade old. So it really makes me wonder whether or not the PlayStation 6 is actually going to come out anytime soon. And it's something that I wouldn't like lean too heavily into until like Sony says otherwise, because I still feel like the PlayStation 5 still has some years left, and honestly, I feel like, the price for the PlayStation 5 has slowly been, like, coming down, and it's getting to a point where more people are starting to buy it, and but at the same time, like, when, prices for game consoles start to go down, the further they start to go down, it points to the fact that the company is actually planning on releasing a new console sometime in the future. Now with Nintendo, I feel like things are a little bit different. They don't wait quite as long as Sony does to release a new console. It seems like they wait like every like 6 years or something to that effect, because that was definitely the case between GameCube and Wii, and then the Wii and the Wii U, and then like the Wii U and the Nintendo Switch. Like Nintendo don't wait too long to release new consoles. It seemed like they wait like every like 5 or 6 years or what have you. Sony's really a bit different, and I don't know. It's felt that way for quite some time, because you look back in the '90s, like the I think the PS1 came out back in '94. Then we got the PS2 in 2000, and then we got the PS3 in '06. So I don't know. I feel like it really depends on how they view the success of their console and whether or not they feel like their console has peaked in terms of popularity. I'm not exactly sure whether or not the PlayStation 5 has peaked in terms of popularity, but I will say that like the best games on the PlayStation 5, most of them anyways, really don't stand up to a lot of the top, selling games that we got on the PlayStation 4. And it's not to say that the PlayStation 5 games are bad or anything like that. It's just that when the PS4 was popular, the cost of living was different. It was less expensive to buy consoles and games and stuff like that. And I feel like in the future, it's going to be more difficult to purchase like physical media and discs and CDs and stuff like that, because of the economy going to hell, and the fact that there might be tariffs set in place um to raise the price of like certain technologies like from foreign countries and stuff like that. And even like it's even going to have like a detrimental effect on digital media and stuff like that in the future. So it really makes me wonder what the price for the PlayStation 6 is going to look like. I'm praying it's not going to be like double of like the cost of the PlayStation 5 or anything like that, because I can't see anyone paying like 1 grand for the PlayStation 6 or anything like that. Because if that's the case, people are just going to go the retro route, just going to buy old games and play the classics, because it seemed like there's a lot of classic stuff that stands the test of time. And when you look at like high profile video game companies, whether it be like Konami or Sony or what have you, for the most part, they like to remake older games, and it seems like remakes are some of the things that's keeping certain companies relevant. Like Square Enix, they're milking the hell out of Final Fantasy VII, and they're basically remaking older titles and stuff like that. And it seems like the remakes, for the most part, are the only things that really get people's attention, aside from new releases of popular video game franchises that became well known to casuals like during the teens or the 2000s or the 90s or what have you. So, it really makes me wonder what the future of gaming is going to look like. But I can definitely say for certain that I don't expect the PlayStation 6 to come as soon as 2027. Maybe I'm right about that. Maybe I'm wrong. Only time will tell.